protest, a business owner in Kenya, Simon Njagi, joins me to get a sense of what happened earlier in Nairobi, which is also, earlier plunged into protest, and then lessons that Nigerians can learn from that, because some are drawing comparison between both protests. Let's bring in business owner from Kenya, Simon Njagi. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for inviting me on your show. I'm saddened to hear that the same thing which is happening in Kenya is also happening in Nigeria. As a business owner, it's been a lot of chaos. So many businesses were vandalized. So the demonstration tends to start peaceful, but they tend to be hijacked by a lot of criminal gangs. They're out there to root. So a lot of streets in Nairobi had so many vandalized shops. They went at an extent of banning some shops. So I'm happy to hear that there's been no loss of life in Nigeria. Unfortunately, that has not been the situation in Kenya. The criminal gangs, some of them are violent, so sometimes the police are forced to use a lot of force. So I would really hope that whatever the grievances the citizens have in Nigeria, that they would use the channels which are there, for example, legal or parliamentary. I think that would be the best way to resolve any grievances.
And I wanted to ask, because in Kenya, we also saw, the violence erupted in that protest as well. In Nigeria, some part of it has been peaceful. We haven't really heard anything untoward in Lagos. It's been really peaceful. But in the nation's capital, Abuja and some other parts, we've seen the violence. And police is saying, look, these protests have been hijacked. At what point should protesters, begin to pay attention to perhaps those who have an ulterior motive in their midst?
It's very difficult to know at what point. Like I said, all of them start peaceful, but unfortunately, there's always some guys, some criminals find it easy to protest and break into shops and steal things like phones. So, and also, at some point, I'm sure now everyone is being fearful, everyone is avoiding towns. But unfortunately, when that starts, even the business owners sometimes tend to form their own kind of militias. That's what happened to Kenya. So now you start having protesters, genuine Protestants, mixed with criminal gangs, mixed with the business owner forming their own militias to protect their own businesses, and also goons. So some unfortunately, some politicians might end up hiring goons. So yeah, it becomes a total mess, because in most of these demonstrations, I'll be honest, politicians also take advantage. They take advantage, like people in the opposition, take advantage to show that the government is not popular. So unfortunately, it will end up being a chaotic kind of scenario.
So let's talk about the comparison that is now being drawn between the protests in Nigeria and that in Kenya. I wanted to ask, because this protest started just by one post on social media, just one person with a banner, and then, it became something that a lot of people, started to buy into. And so what role does social media play in terms of this protest?
Social media is quite influential, because it's being used to coordinate people from very different regions. For example, like the Kenyan one, leaderless. There's no face to it, and that's the challenge, because sometimes you find some organization working behind the scene. Because when people are protesting, you find there's definitely some element of organization. So you find banners, printouts. So there's someone funding the protest, but it's not someone you can easily trace, which now becomes a big risk, because there's no one to control them. So and all this they're using, all this is being coordinated through social media.
And the question a lot of people ask in terms of this protest, whether it's because we also know that the court has now banned protesters, from taking to the streets of, in Ghana as well. But the question people ask is, what impact in the long run do these protests have, especially when you look at the demands being made by protesters? For example, the one in Kenya, can you say that, look, Kenya is better for it, after that protest?
50-50. When it started, it was a win because at least the government was able to pull back some of the bills it had brought, which were not popular. But unfortunately, the fact that it is leaderless and it is there's no one to attach to the protest, there's no one to control people, it has quite a lot of control. Because I'll be honest, by now most citizens are satisfied with the changes the government made, but there are still people taking advantage. So, right now, in all the protests happening in Kenya right now, I would say there are no genuine protesters, it's just criminal guns taking advantage. So it's been a win, but now it's spiraled out of control.
So the idea of a leaderless protest is also, something that a lot of people are also raising questions about, whether it is the right way to protest or not. For security agencies, they were looking for someone who can take, who can take responsibility if anything goes wrong. But for other people who have been involved in protests, they're saying, look, you need to have a leader who can stand in case of dialogue, with concern, for example, the government. So the idea of a leaderless protest, what do you make of it?
It's a big challenge because, like I said, when the protest started, we were all united under one issue, which was the finance bill, which the government was able to pull back. So majority of Kenyans were satisfied. But now, because of the aspect of being leaderless, now I would say any kind of organization is taking advantage of the situation. So next week it will be they want the president to go. The next time they won't change dissolve the parliament. So the fact that it's leaderless, I would say it creates a problem because everyone is trying to take advantage and pass their agenda across.
And so let's also talk about the need for dialogue, because one of the things as you see protesting across Africa, especially with young people, one of the things you hear is they are not going to dialogue. No, the government has the demands, and government should meet the demands that have been raised. Do you think that at some point there should be compromise to say, look, let's have a conversation? Or should protesters just go straight and say, you have a demand, meet a demand, we're not going to have a dialogue?
Definitely there has to be structures, so you can't demand something which is unconstitutional. It's not governed by law. So there has to be dialogue. If there's need for policy change, there has to be policy change. It has to be structured. That's the problem with the kind of demonstrations we're having, because some of the things which they're asking for is not actually structured. It's not something which can just be implemented. So that's the challenge of not having a leader, like someone who can articulate the issues comfortably, clearly. So people end up asking for things which are quite frankly not achievable. And that will bring more issues. That will make it a demonstration bigger because start saying, look, these guys are not listening to us. But now you cannot force that. You can make the entire leadership go against the constitution.
And the idea of discontent in Africa, whether it's in Uganda, where the idea of a protest is also brewing, which I talked about Ghana earlier, how should African leaders begin to address all of these issues and the idea of just discontent back home?
I think they just have to follow intelligence. I'm sure most governments have the intelligence service within their government. They need to be proactive. There's definitely, I feel like some NGOs are taking advantage of the situation. So I think they need to be proactive and at least arrest the thing before it gets out of hand.
And in terms of arresting it before it gets out of hand, what should be the strategy?
Okay, for example, say for Kenya, we did public participation. So before the new bill is introduced, political leaders went around all the country getting the views of the Kenyans. So that's a big step. So once you get the views of the Kenyans, you get the temperature of what's happening in the ground, implement that at that. Don't try and force your way into something which is not popular. So unfortunately, our current government, they did the public participation. They voted in the bill the first round, even after the citizens saying that they're not comfortable with some issues. So I would say the best thing is just at least follow what the people are saying. Feel the ground, the pulse of the people, and implement things based on them. Unfortunately, for most of African countries, they're a little bit in a financial situation. So they have out of debt burden. It's a pain because taxes have to be increased. I think this is something which can be implemented on step-by-step basis. And also, I think the best thing is just better utilization of funds. Because with better utilization of funds, with no corruption, I don't think most of us would be in this kind of situation.
And Simon, just before I let you go, if we were to use this protest as some sort of barometer, and not just the protest, also government response, as some sort of barometer to gauge democracy in Africa, where would you say we are at?
Oh, I think it's we are growing. We I'll give it in the 70s, 80s. It's good that people can come out and voice their concern. It's good that people can demonstrate peacefully. Unfortunately, there are people who are taking advantage of the demonstration. But I'll be honest, it's a growth because in the past, a lot of dictatorship regimes do not allow this. It's good that people can unite. It's good that it shows that the level of education has increased because people are very conscious on item by item in kind of bills which are being introduced. So I think it's a good sign that Africa is really growing in terms of democracy. The only challenge is that people are taking advantage of the demonstrations.
All right, so I understand that I was going to let you go, but I understand that I have 4 minutes left in the conversation. As you, I'm sure you're monitoring somehow the situation in Nigeria, and you saw what happened in Kenya. What lessons can we draw, from all of this?
It would be nice if there was a pace or there's leadership in the demonstration. That way, it can be issue-based, not just random things. So I'll be happy. I'll be happy to see my brothers and sisters in Nigeria coming together and tackling issue by issue, whatever they are comfortable with, specifying it, looking at solutions, and passing it through the normal structures, either through parliament or judiciary, and or if it's not possible, if the current regime is not going through what people are saying, I think it's good just to be patient and wait for the next election. Rather than like in Kenya, it's changed from demonstration to now the president has to go for election again. So yeah, I feel nice if everything would be shined in the law.
And as we wind down the conversation now, when you look at in Kenya, the protest took place for quite a long time, and in Nigeria, it's going to be for 10 days. How sustainable is that, and what are some of the issues that could arise when you have a protest, for that long?
For example, our currency now is compared to the dollar is not doing so well. We have lost some few units. We're in the peak season, so we are losing tourists. When most Westerners look at when they go online or look at the news, they hear that there's violence in Kenya. They don't care if it's one region, they just think it's the whole region. Businesses are losing a lot because at this point, Kenya is looking like it's not stable. So a lot of people are considering expanding their businesses to outside Kenya. So that's the fact that most people are demonstrating because of lack of employment and due to the demonstration out of business of Kenya is not good. So definitely, as a long term, it's a very big disadvantage and it's a deterrence to investment. And businesses are making losses because at least twice a week you can't do any business. You can't go shopping, you can't sell anything. Everyone is taken.
Thank you so much for your time, business owner Simon Njagi, joining us, who joined us from Kenya. Thank you very much for your time and your analysis.
Thank you for having me.